Hello and welcome to Budget and India Inc. We're just days away from what could well be a make or break budget for industry. What is it that India Inc. is seeking from the Finance Minister this time around? We've got a very special panel joining us over the next 30 minutes to discuss and debate just that. Joining us today on Budget and India Inc. is Rajan Mittal from the Bharti Group. We've got Nainalal Kidwai from HSBC. We've got Harsh Mariwala from Marico. Baba Kalyani from Bharat Forge. We've also got S. Gopalakrishnan from Infosys, and a little later we'll also be joined by Rajiv Lal of IDFC. That's the panel that we've got over the next 30 minutes to discuss and debate India Inc.'s expectations from Budget 2012. Rajan Mittal, I want to start this off with you. The big picture, because everyone seems to be concerned about the roadmap as far as fiscal consolidation is concerned. What is it that you're expecting on this front from the Finance Minister?
No, I think it's important. This issue has been earlier also addressed by the Finance Minister. He has his, I would say, certain limitations, but we can clearly see that government will be hard-pressed to work on that, especially keeping in mind this investment has not really taken shape. I hope that brings in revenues this time. Of course, there are areas of food security, the NREGA bills which they have to spend. Keeping that in mind, it's important that especially on this particular thing on fiscal, they must keep an eye on it, and I'm sure that that's what the Finance Minister is going to do.
Nainalal Kidwai, I want to bring you in here. Like Rajan Mittal was saying, it is a big concern, fiscal deficit. What are the measures that you would like the Finance Minister to take to address the fisc? Because India clearly has got among the highest fiscal deficit among all growth markets.
Well, let me start by saying what I would like to see is the fiscal deficit coming under control. So a very strong signal that the country is serious about sorting through what is a burgeoning fiscal deficit. And this can happen, as you well know, on two counts. Either revenues have to go up or spending has to go down. Now, when you've got a situation where subsidies are possibly even increasing, for example, the new food subsidy bill puts at least 30,000 crores back in terms of spend into the government machinery, as in government would have to spend at least that. And many who are estimating the food subsidy bill today to be well beyond the 30,000 crores government has said. I've heard numbers as high as 270,000 crores. And it really is a very expensive proposition. So where is that money going to come from? Now, if revenues have to go up, as they would, to take care of these new subsidies, let alone the old ones that are continuing, then taxes have to go up. Now, that would be very unfortunate, because if taxes have to go up, then corporates who would otherwise be investing the money, and we all know that growth is really falling off the cliff right now. We need growth to be back into our country's agenda.
Baba Kalyani, like Nainalal Kidwai was saying, it's a tough macro environment, very little options as far as the government is concerned. What is it that you're expecting from this budget then? How do you see the Finance Minister doing this balancing act?
Well, I think, clearly there are a lot of challenges in front of the Finance Minister when he's presenting the budget. Large number of those challenges come from, the fiscal issues, inflation, commodity pricing, global financial environments, etc. But I think, I would expect that some very strong measures are put in the direction of policies that have been announced to create growth in the country. For example, the Prime Minister has announced a national manufacturing policy. And I think, to convert that into reality, we really need to bring in some amount of stimulus in relation to investments in manufacturing.
Chris, would you agree with Baba Kalyani that we need certainty of policy? Good policy alone is not enough. It needs to be implemented well. There needs to be certainty and consistency as far as policy is concerned, and even as far as taxation is concerned. Is that the big demand of the IT industry?
Yes, and that is the ask from the IT industry side. We need predictability of the policy implementation. We need the government to act uniformly, act swiftly. Whenever a clarification is sought and a clarification is made, it is reflected in how every single policy is implemented immediately. Today what happens is, we get stuck in tribunals and courts and things like that, and the cost of doing business is actually very, very high. We need to increase the velocity of doing business. We need to improve the predictability. We need the government to bring clarity on the implementation of policies and regulations. And this is actually extremely important as far as the IT industry is concerned, because this is impacting not just the Indian companies, it is also impacting multinationals who have invested significant number of money, created significant number of jobs in India.
Naina Lal Kidwai, I want to get you back into this discussion. You spoke about fiscal deficit and the concerns surrounding it. An obvious fallout will be an increase in government borrowings. Do you see government borrowings in FY13 going up significantly over what we saw in FY12?
I think the government will have to continue to borrow to basically manage through these really the subsidy bills and the programs which are ongoing. You can't withdraw a program like NREGA once it's instituted, and then there are these new programs like the food subsidy bill, which may take time to actually begin to dribble out, but the fact is they are an additional cost. So government borrowing, which is always a worry because it begins to crowd out other needs. Government borrowing can crowd out corporate borrowing, and hence we have seen our corporates going offshore more and more to borrow. But as government borrowing goes up, one of the ways, of course, to aid in keeping that down is disinvestment. Government has a number of very good companies in its fold, very good banks in its fold, and it's hard to understand why government would need to hold on to all of these assets at all times. So a disinvestment program which allows government to actually bring that money in to the areas that government needs to spend on, which is infrastructure and all of the programs that they want to continue, would be important.
Okay, so it all comes down to divestment. The divestment target of FY12, 40,000 crores. We're going to get nowhere close to that. Rajan Mittal, just to take Naina's point forward, what's your sense? Do you think we will be able to set an aggressive divestment target this year and achieve it?
Well, we are hoping so, that this year should be the year where the disinvestment should take shape, because much of monies are needed for the programs that have been put. And if we have to actually move into the next step, which is really when we talk about education, skill development, healthcare, governments of the day will need that kind of resource.
So Naina Lal Kidwai, given the ONGC fiasco, we all know divestment is going to be very critical in FY13, but given the ONGC fiasco, what route do you expect the government to take this fiscal as far as divestment is concerned? Will they go in for an auction, a buyback, a normal stake sale? How do you see them going about disinvestment? Now,
the disinvestment program has taken an interesting turn in that the markets, as you saw, had an issue, and many FPOs and IPOs, as in those that were going to actually be placed into the Indian retail investors' hands, have actually fallen away as a result. The good news is the markets are back, so I hope the government will again come back to do some of its issuance through the IPO and FPO mechanism, because what that does is puts equity back into the hands of individuals who can then basically benefit from the markets, but more importantly, it allows for a wider holding of these stocks. Baba Kalyani, everyone's talking about the withdrawal of stimulus. Do you see it happening this time around? Because if that happens, then clearly excise duty rates will go up, and that could potentially affect demand, especially for a sector like yours, auto.
Well, I think in the short term it will have some impact on demand, but by and large, no stimulus anywhere is going to be permanent. So I think, to that extent, industry will learn how to tackle this. I mean, there will be some challenges in the short term, but I think they can be overcome.
Rajan Mittal, would you agree with that view? Do you expect an increase in excise on, even on some of these consumer products? And if that were to happen, do you see that affecting demand?
Well, I think already we are seeing the pressure of inflation. We are also seeing manufacturing bases are low. So we hope at this stage the excise is not really, increased, because that has to be passed on to the consumer. Probably this is not the stage to be done on the excise matters.
Okay, let's get a man who runs a big FMCG company to answer this. Harsh Mariwala, what's your sense? If excise duty rates were to go up, will this impact the FMCG business?
See, I think in FMCG what happens is most of the FMCGs have have established units in excise-free zones in Uttaranchal and in near Baddi, So anyway, even if it is not rolled back, there is no impact of that on the FMCG products, most of the FMCG products. Separately, whether they will roll back or not, or whether they will go back to the earlier levels, I don't think so, considering the fact that the overall economic growth is in the range of 7%. Any increase in excise duties will impact the demand further. So areas like consumer durables or auto, they can't afford to bear more excise, especially when there is demand has gone down. And I think more importantly, the interest costs have risen. And if the interest costs are down, then to that extent, the government could have taken an excise increase. But at this stage, I don't think the government will take that.
Okay, Rajan Mittal, the one big reform that we've been talking about, at least for the last 4-5 years, is the goods and services tax. Every year there's a mention of it, but very little progress. Do you see a concrete roadmap for the rollout of GST in this year's budget?
Well, this is the most important reform the industry has been saying for the last 2 years. This will change the contours and the shape how business is done in India. I hope that there is a roadmap fixed. It's not only the finance minister. I think the political parties across the spectrum need to sit on this, because this is a national reform. This is not a reform of a particular political party or a budget. So we are hoping that some kind of understanding must be reached.
Baba Kalyani, how critical is this from an industry's point of view? Do you think industry is already kind of built this in as far as their future growth projections are concerned, and it's a huge disappointment that it hasn't happened so far?
Well, that's extremely critical. I think, as far as industry is concerned, everybody assumes it's a done deal, because clearly it's been demonstrated that not having a GST in place makes industry uncompetitive in many areas because of multiple points of taxation. And I think a uniform GST there's been a lot of debate and discussion on this, and the conclusion is that it will improve our GDP anywhere between 0.5 to 1 percentage points.
Okay, so it is critical that we get GST going. The other big reform, of course, is also DTC that we're looking for an update. Chris, I want to get you in here. Is it such a big deal, even from an IT industry's point of view, that these two reforms, are up and running quickly?
I do expect that there will be implementation of the direct tax code. There will be implementation of goods and services tax, GST. These two are very much needed. This is part of the overall reform process. On the GST side, it simplifies the movement of goods across the country, reduces the cost. And on the direct tax code, the simplification is very much needed.
Harsh Mariwala, but GST is a political issue, isn't it? I mean, we all know which is the party that's stalling GST's rollout in this country. So given this backdrop, do you see some forward movement on GST in this year's budget?
I don't think it can come on its own, because clearly you require help from other states in terms of the constitutional amendment bill, which is required to be passed. Separately, there are certain issues to be ironed out as far as GST is concerned, whether it is a compensation to be paid to states for the CST reduction from 4 to 2%. So I think you can lay some sort of a roadmap and resolve certain pending issues about compensation, a few other things. Even some other states are complaining about the IT support, information technology support for making GST happen. So I think you can lay some roadmap that by this date I will do this, so that the GST is launched hopefully after 1 year. But in this budget, to expect GST to be launched is, it's just not possible.
Okay, time for a short break here on Budget and India Inc. When we come back, we'll talk about some specific sectors and their expectations.